live on the air. I'm Richard Saile.
This is wild.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lounge Time, continuing the 2026 offseason grades. I'm your host, Rich Saile, and today we are starting our first team in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers offseason grade for 2026. Let's get right into what did they do this offseason well, and what are we concerned about. So we're going to start with what they added, and the two biggest headlines came on the offensive side of the ball, which were upgrading their wide receiver room. Mike Evans in free agency finally gets a chance to play with a great offensive coach in Kyle Shanahan. So a good veteran receiver that's on the twilight of his career. And now he's got hopefully a little bit of a couple years for him to continue playing at a high level with Kyle Shanahan in the ways that he can get wide receivers open. DeZon Stribling was their highlight first pick at the very first pick of the second round because they traded out of round one and moved into early round two to get Stribling, so that them and Buffalo swap picks from what I remember. I think that was the specific trade I remember that went down, or vice versa. I know it was something like that where DeZon Stribling was an early second round pick, which a lot of people had him as a day two pick, but not that early in the rounds. So they also added Raheem Morris as their new defensive coordinator because Robert Saile took the Titans head coaching job, which was in our last offseason grades video when we did the Tennessee Titans. So let's look at the Niners' current state of the roster, which you could argue this could be one of two ways you can look at it. This team, when healthy, is potentially a wild card team, albeit in a tough division. The other way you can look at it is this team, did they lose too much talent? And that's where, for me, looking at their window from when it started back in 2019, and right now, I think this is the way that I would say it. Their window closed last season. I do not think their window is open much longer. I think that is shut since last season. I think Christian McCaffrey being banged up a lot. Trent Williams getting near the end of his career. He's got maybe a year or two left. Mike Evans has got a couple years left. Brock Purdy's in the mega deal of his contract that has now kicked in for a couple seasons now, or is just starting to kick in. Nick Bosa's got an injury history that has kind of hurt him in a way. Fred Warner's getting older. This team is now beginning to lose top talent, and it's been that way since they went to 2 Super Bowls in a span of 5 seasons with multiple NFC Championship game appearances. I want to say it was 4 in a span of 5 years. So this team, guys, they might have lost too much talent. Now, they have Mac Jones as their backup in case Purdy gets hurt. Mac Jones did really well for them last season as a backup. Supposedly, and I read this within the last 48 hours, the Niners will trade Mac Jones if they believe Curtis Rourke, who was the Indiana Hoosiers quarterback before Fernando Mendoza, is able to slide into the QB2 spot, meaning he'll be the backup behind Brock Purdy if he performs well in camp, which I think they're saying that more so just to kind of have teams that are desperate for a quarterback to bring in to trade for Mac Jones, which I don't think you're going to see any major move be made until the trade deadline when you see what teams need it and injuries will happen and all that. So I wouldn't read too much smoke into that. But looking at this Niners team, if the skill guys stay healthy, meaning Mike Evans stays healthy, Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, George Kittle, who's coming off a very brutal injury, if he's back healthy, this team is without a doubt in the conversation for a wild card spot as a ceiling, without question. And they won on the road in Philadelphia last year. So Kyle Shanahan has no problem winning games on the road. The problem is this team is not as talented as those previous Niner teams were. My big concern with the Niners right now offensively is the future of that offensive line. Now, I know what people are going to say, well, Kyle Shanahan can make it work with a makeshift offensive line. I don't know if that's always the case. I think that they don't have a long-term plan for when Trent Williams retires. I think that's a very glaring problem that concerns me if I'm the Niners, because if he decides to retire after this season, the next biggest name is Colton McKivitz at tackle. And then you did sign Vidarian Lowe, who was a former Patriot. But Vidarian Lowe, trust me when I say this, I'm not saying this just because I'm a New England fan. I watched him. He is not a starting left tackle caliber player. He's not. And even at guard and center concern me. I don't like the depth of this group specifically, because if Brock Purdy cannot stay healthy, if Christian McCaffrey is not healthy and they don't run the ball as well, they don't have depth on the interior level of the offensive line. Their tackles, yes, Lowe is a good swing tackle that can help out, but there's no long-term solution. And I look at an offseason where I thought they needed to address some key holes for the future. The Niners did not do that. And if I'm a 49er fan, I feel like that with Seattle just recently winning a Super Bowl, the Rams going all in 2.0 again, Arizona's in a rebuild. You're not thinking you're in a rebuild. You're finding out now, how do you reload? And that's where I don't know what John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are thinking as far as reloading this roster, because this doesn't feel like a reload. This feels like a huge step back from what they should have been addressing, which was offensive line depth. I know they got receiver upgrades. Yes, I'm aware Mike Evans is a good short-term option. I know they got Deshaun Stribling from Ole Miss. And I know Kyle Shanahan knows how to make receivers great. That's not the issue. The issue is Christian McCaffrey's been banged up. Isaac Guerendo is now fourth on the depth chart behind rookie Kalen Black, and Jordan James is second on the running back depth chart. Again, the skill guys don't worry me. But at some point, and we remember this early in Kyle Shanahan's tenure with the Niners, the backups can only get you so far. And that's what happened last year when they just ran into a buzzsaw of a team in Seattle, and Seattle gave it to them. On the ground, through the air, they were just banged up. And I'm fearing that with the state of things and the lack of addressing needs to the offensive line, I would be concerned if I'm Brock Purdy and those veterans that have taken a ton of injuries in that window that the Niners have had, 2 Super Bowls and 4 championship games. I would be really concerned as far as this team fighting for a wild card spot, considering how tough the NFC is going to have teams that are going to be fighting. There are going to be teams that made moves and are improving, that we'll get into later in the series, that I think are going to be challenging for a wild card spot. And if the schedule lined up perfectly for them and they're able to take advantage of it, they're going to steal a wild card spot from a team that was able to get one last year. To the defensive side of the ball, so Raheem Morris now takes over for Robert Saile. Their front four, again, it's a good front four. Odighizuwa from Dallas, that's a nice move on the inside with Alfred Collins. I am just very concerned with the edge rushers, because we know Nick Bosa, when healthy, is a top 10, I would argue top 5 pass rusher when healthy. He is. It's just, you could decide who you want to switch him over. I'm not going to get into that debate today. But Keon White, he's very good, but he's not a guy that you can depend on to get a lot of sack production. The guy I'm going to tell you guys right now that needs to have a leap is Mykel Williams. First round pick last season ago. he needs to have a big lead. He needs to have a big lead. And if he does not, that unit becomes even more worrisome. And I'm going to tease it for when we get into the defense. Fred Warner's getting up there in age. Yes, they got Dre Greenlaw back, which is a huge guy that knows the defense, can bring the locker room together. And he's a guy that knows he's a guy that knows the system. Romello Height, they drafted in the second round out of Texas Tech. I actually liked him as a late player in late round 2, early round 3. He's a nice little rotation piece. I think he's got a lot of speed that he'll help in. And he's a good rotation piece for if Bosa needs a break, or maybe CJ West, who I don't think will be the starting defensive end for the Niners majority of the season. It will be either Romello Height if he makes a big leap in camp into the preseason, or Mykel Williams. I could see one of those guys being defensive ends. They have the prototype of size, the speed for a John Lynch, Raheem Morris defensive end that can rush upfield, speed to the quarterback. That's kind of how John Lynch has built his teams, from the front line to the back end, and it's mostly speed rushers on the edge, a la Nick Bosa being the main guy that's been getting a lot of attention over the years since the Niners have been on this window. Now let's go to the unit I am concerned about the most, and this might be more concerning than the offensive line. It's 1A, 1B. They're secondary. Let me tell you guys the starting secondary for the 49ers right now, and you tell me if this defense does not concern you. Demadre Lenore, Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, Renardo Green, and Upton Stout. I'll say it again. Demadre Lenore, Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, Renardo Green, Upton Stout. That's a starting secondary you're taking into next season. This season coming up right now. That is alarmingly concerning. And I know that Charvarius Ward didn't pan out when they gave him a big contract from the Chiefs. I know he went to the Colts after that. You're going to tell me that there was not one corner that you feel like, even through free agency or trade, that you could have felt like, okay, at least get somebody in that room that can help develop young guys. I don't even know who on this secondary are you worried about, because this looks like a secondary that's going to struggle mightily. Because there's a lot of inexperience on that team. There's a lot of inexperience. I know Jair Brown's entering year 3, but he's never really had starting caliber games under his belt. A lot of these, like Lenore, he's mostly been either a nickelback or in dime situations. He's never really had a lot of years starting. This secondary is glaringly bad. I'm shocked that they didn't even bring a veteran. Jack Jones is technically the second string cornerback on this depth chart right now. And he's not a bad player. He does get into trouble sometimes. But I am shocked he's not even starting over some of these guys. Like, he's not that. Nate Hobbs they brought in, who was a very good corner at times for Vegas and Green Bay. He's not starting. I'm a little worried right now. I'm very concerned with this secondary for the Niners. So to me, the two glaring needs that were not addressed, and it's going to come back to haunt them this season. I'm on the record of that. And I think if they were able to address one or both of those needs, even if they signed a cheap veteran or got a very good player slotted with their early draft picks, I would say, okay, at least they're doing short-term work, or maybe they might have found somebody long-term. But the fact they come away with none of those needs in a division that's tough, the NFC, there are teams from the bottom to the middle tier from last year that got better, and they were one of those teams that made the playoffs last year. I'm saying to myself, two glaring holes. This team might not be a playoff team next year. They might not be a playoff team this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if they missed the playoffs entirely. And that's why I think it is safe to say that window closed last season. It closed last season. And there were a lot of good players on that team that had great all-pro seasons. But injuries derailed this team from winning one, and Kyle Shanahan choke jobs twice. So I mentioned that Mykel Williams needs to have a breakout lead. Secondary is the biggest glaring hole on defense. Offensive line is the biggest hole on offense. Let's go to bold predictions, because this is where now I will confidently say that this team, with its two biggest holes on the roster, the 49ers offensive line specifically, will finish top 5 in most sacks allowed, meaning they will be a bottom 5 offensive line in the league. They will be near the very top in sacks allowed. Brock Purdy, he can move a little bit, but he's not a guy like a Josh Allen, like a Lamar Jackson, that can extend plays and run out of the pocket for a ton of yards. This is not the type of system that Purdy will be able to get out of with a very weak offensive line. He doesn't have that kind of talent, but he can move. He can make throws on the run, yes, but not to the degree where he can run out of the pocket and get, let's say, a 15, 20-yard run on a consistent basis. I know that's why I'm not comparing him to Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but my point is, with this bad of an offensive line, he's going to have to either throw the ball away quick. If they do try to roll him out more, he's going to have to find a way to extend plays. And he has made extended plays before, but at a very high rate, he's going to have to do it. And defenses will learn. Let's contain him. Let's bring in maybe a 5-man blitz where we can bring a slot corner over so we can stop him from rolling out to the right, because Shanahan's offenses, there are some times when they move the pocket to the right. That's where some 5-man pressures might work. I think that's going to be a unit that is going to give up one of the most sacks in the league this season. Definitely the top 5, because this offensive line is going to be glaring. It won't be all on Trent Williams. It's on the rest of the offensive line. And if they do have injuries, it's going to reinforce my point even more. Which leads to my next bold prediction, which is that the 49ers pass defense will also finish in the bottom 5 in sacks, takeaways, and yards. Because that secondary is going to give up a ton of yards. And I know Raheem Morris has been an established coordinator, whether it was 5 years ago when he won the Super Bowl with the Rams. And he did have a head coaching stint in Tampa and Atlanta. It didn't work out. But even when he was there on Atlanta and Tampa, those secondaries still got shredded. This secondary is glaring. We're going to probably give up high 200-yard passing games. Some games maybe 300 plus. This is a bad secondary. And I think this is going to be a team that is going to have to get creative defensively. Are they going to blitz? Well, Nick Bosa, you can't leave one-on-one if healthy. But the question is, how healthy is Nick Bosa? We think Alfred Collins is going to be a guy that gets maybe 7 to, let's say, 9.5 sacks? I can't bank on that. He's a good player. I can't bank on that. Odigizua, he can do it. Is he going to get a lot of one-on-ones? Maybe. But is he going to produce the numbers like he did in Dallas, with a secondary that they're going to test this season with a lot of teams? Mykel Williams, does he make a jump from his rookie year to his sophomore season? He was hurt last year. He has to have a double-digit sack season. He has to get 10-plus sacks for them to at least have a chance to give this secondary some time where they're like, okay, we don't have to worry about a deep post, a go ball over our heads. Because these offenses will challenge this defense. Whether it's Sean McVay, whether it is a new-look Seattle offense, whoever they're going to play is going to test that secondary. And that's why I think the secondary will be bottom 5 in yards, sacks, takeaways. Because they're going to struggle. The run defense might be the strength of this team, But the pass defense is absolutely going to be the glaring weakness. And that's where I'm at when it comes to this roster particularly. Now, before we go into the grade, let's go into the schedule real quick for who they will be playing this season and where realistically I could see their record being. So game 1 is September 10th against the Rams. This is the game, and I want to make sure I remember this correctly. I think this is the one where it's in Australia. And I'm going to look it up real quick while we're doing this. I think it's in Australia because this is also the game that they usually mix in for, I know the last 2 seasons it's been in Brazil, and I think it's in Australia. Yeah, it is. Melbourne, Australia. So this is why they're not the opening game, because time zones, different countries. Let's put it that way. But they open up with the Rams, who earlier this month got Myles Garrett. That is a tall task for a team that has an aging left tackle and guys that are not proven on the offensive line. Miami, Arizona after that, they have a good chance to beat those teams. Denver at home, at Seattle, Washington at home on a Monday night. They'll probably be 3-3 at that point. At Atlanta's a big game. That's a coin flip game. I think that's a game that could go either way. Vegas, they'll be Vegas. So I could see right now 4-4 with a game at Dallas, which is another coin flip game that I think might decide one of the wild card spots. Minnesota's a game that they'll be home for Minnesota. I think they can win that game. The Giants in Giants, do not sleep. That's another one of those West Coast to East Coast type of games. And then they got to go back to West Coast to play the Rams and the Chargers back in California, home of the Rams at the Chargers. And then they got to go to Kansas City on a Sunday late primetime stage, go back home to play the Eagles, and then at Arizona to close out the season. So their beginning schedule has some tough games. They get them mostly at home with Denver and not mostly home. Denver's the only tough game they get at home before the bye. At Seattle will be tough for them. The game in Australia with the Rams opening game will be tough. You have to be at least 4-3 into the bye week, and then that second half stretch where there will be games that I think decide the wild card spots. At Dallas notably, at the Giants notably, the Rams at home, at the Chargers, at Kansas City, and home for the Eagles. 6 games in the last 11 games of this team's schedule. 6 are going to decide your wild card spot. And the way I see it, you're going to have to go somewhere between 3-3 and 4-2, which I don't think that's going to happen. I don't. And it's not me betting against Kyle Shanahan. It's me being concerned with what this team has from a roster standpoint and a weaknesses that are glaring that I think these teams are going to catch up to it. Dallas was a high-scoring offense last year. Denver has a defense that can send 4 and still get pressure. Seattle, that defense is still mostly intact. The Rams added Myles Garrett, and you're going to see Seattle and the Rams twice. Kansas City is a little better. That's late in the year, but you got to go to Kansas City after being on the West Coast back-to-back weeks. Got to go to the Giants, who will be better. Okay, Brian Flores will blitz, and Minnesota is supposed to be better offensively. There are games that I think it's going to come down to, can they win the coin flip games? And some of those being on the road, some of those being at home, that's going to decide your chance right there to make a wild card spot. Now, I'm saying right now, they're going to be battling teams from the NFC East. The North will have teams that will be fighting for wild card spots. Are they good enough in that 6 to 10 range? They're more likely there than they are at the top 5 in the NFC right now. So, schedule-wise, I'm going to say from a record standpoint, I'm going to say they'll be somewhere between, and this is tough because I'm going to say 8-9 is likely. I could see 8-9. I don't think they're going to win a lot of games. I don't. I think they can get above 500. It's just not likely with how the schedule fell. They have the most travel mileage in the league. That's going to be against them in some ways. So, again, that's where I look at a lot of things that are stacked against this team. And it's not necessarily betting against Kyle Shanahan. It's betting against the roster that they have built for 2026, which leads me to my grade. I was somewhere between a C- and a D, but I'm going to say a C-. This team has glaring weaknesses. They're going to have to be making a move at the trade deadline if they're planning to keep that window open. And that's not feeling good if I'm a 49er fan where Seattle just won a Super Bowl, the Rams are going all in. You're not worried about Arizona, but you got to worry about those two in the division already. And then you got to look at the NFC as a whole, where the North is going to be competitive. You're going to have probably 2 or 3 teams in that make the playoffs there. And the NFC East is going to be better this season. They're going to be better. I could see a scenario where 2 teams from that division make the playoffs as well. So I don't think you're going to get 3 from the NFC West. I think it's going to be a dogfight that comes down to coin flip games that happen later in the season. This is where you'll see, okay, do we have to make a move at the trade deadline? And I think they're going to have to if they're going to make a run at it for the playoffs and keep that window open. But I think it's closed after last season, especially with how they got beat and the talent and the veterans just getting banged up. It's always injuries or just something goes wrong and the choke job continues. And that's really how the Niners seasons have ended since their window opened in 2019 when they went to their first Super Bowl and made the playoffs for the first time under Shanahan. So there you have it. The 49ers, C- is my offseason grade for them this offseason. Make sure you guys follow along with this offseason grade series. We've got more teams on the way this week. You can give us a follow at LoungeTime Pod on X. Yes, I tweet on X. It's been a little quiet. I had a little tweet earlier today regarding NBA news. So, yes, you can tweet me a question for the show. I have no problem answering it. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. So you guys can get all the latest content. We have more offseason grade episodes on the way. So, this is just getting started. We are going to have at least 2 to 3 episodes per week on these teams until the NFL preseason starts, where that's when we'll start having preseason episodes. And before you know it, football season will be here. So you do not want to miss out on the offseason grades series. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Lounge Time. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode of the offseason grades. And I will see you guys later in the week to debut the next team featured on the offseason grades series. Have a good night, everybody.